John entered the bar, still wearing his nursing uniform. He paused at the entrance, allowing his eyes to adjust to the dim lighting. Loud music started playing, and he shook his head to the beat, even though the song was unfamiliar to him. Once his eyes had adjusted, he noticed a young woman twirling and dancing to "Wee Weenie" "State of Shock" by the Jacksons. She gestured to her leopard print skirt and smiled with the practiced ease of a seasoned professional. Then John saw him, Dr. Michael. The man was waving to get his attention. John walked over to the table, and Dr. Michael stood up, extending his hand. Ignoring the gesture, John sat down. He glanced again at the small stage, where a young blonde woman was flaunting a faux black patent leather bra and panties. Her hair, almost white in the bright light, nearly touched the floor. A man approached the tip jar at the edge of the stage, prompting the girl to lean forward, offering a view of her cleavage with a smile. Dr. Michael cleared his throat and sat down as well. John almost smiled. Dr. Michael was used to commanding respect, and John's deliberate chuckle clearly bothered him. Dr. Michael, 36 years old, stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, with broad shoulders, a narrow waist, curly blonde hair, and piercing blue eyes. He had a light tan, a muscular build, and a dazzling smile. John, with his many freckles, tightly coiled carrot-orange hair, and slightly pot-bellied physique, took no offense at the doctor's good looks. Dr. Michael, on the other hand, wasn't bothered by the admiration of the many female hospital staff, who looked at him with undisguised awe. However, John did judge the young doctor for sleeping with Kenzie, John's wife. "Can I offer you a drink?" asked Dr. Michael, forcing a smile. "You're buying St. Elizabeth's draft," John replied. A short Asian-American waitress approached the table, dressed in the bar's uniform of a black half shirt and red short shorts. "My friend will have St. Elizabeth's draft, right?" Dr. Michael confirmed. "Yes, sir. Are you ready for another Doers on the Rocks?" the waitress chirped. No, I'm off duty at 9, Dr. Michael replied with a smile. "Be right back. Need to hit the men's room," John said, getting up from the table. When he returned, John noticed 2 men looking at his table instead of the blonde dancer. As he sat down, they quickly redirected their gaze to the stage. John took a deep sip of his cold beer and smiled. "There's nothing like an icy cold," he began, but then his eyes suddenly widened. "John, I wanted to have this meeting because Kenzie is very upset," Dr. Michael said, studying John's face. "She and I would both appreciate it if we could come to an understanding, something like this." "Ma'am?" John interrupted, standing up and waving to the waitress. "Yes, sir," she responded. "Please take this beer and don't let it out of your sight," John said, pulling his cell phone from his uniform pocket. "Don't pour it out, please." "What?" Dr. Michael asked, confused. "What?" echoed the waitress. "Please," John whispered hoarsely. 911, what's your emergency?" said a woman's voice on the phone. "Yes, ma'am. My name is John, and I have severe allergies," John said thickly. "I'm at the dead-end bar, and my wife's lover attacked me." "What?" Dr. Michael squealed. If he hadn't been struggling to stay alert, John would have laughed at the high-pitched squeal from the tall, muscular doctor. "Hey, you didn't say—" One of the muscular men at the next table protested. "Yes, ma'am," John moaned into the phone. "Please send an ambulance." John was amazed at how quickly the ambulance and 2 patrol cars arrived. John showed the medics his medical bracelet, which clearly indicated that he was allergic to sulfur. Don Lee handed the mug of beer to one of the policemen, who sealed it in a plastic bag and asked the frightened girl to write her initials on the bag with a felt-tip pen. For the next 40 minutes, no music played. The girls did not perform, and all visitors and staff were questioned. Dawn Lee, a short Asian-American waitress, cried, repeatedly claiming that she had merely brought the beer to the table and hadn't even poured it. Mandy, the petite bartender, had. "Dude, I don't know, I'm just sitting there watching some girl dance, and the next thing I know you're all here," one of the muscular men at a nearby table protested. "Yeah, we don't even know him," his friend added. "And you all work at the hospital?" asked Officer Steve Hebert. "Service man," said the first muscular man. For the 100th time, he came in, asked for a beer, then went to the bathroom, Dr. Michael told Sergeant Elise Richards. "Next thing I know, he's on the phone with you." Dr. Michael then stated, "For all I know, he could have poisoned himself." Elise stared at the doctor for a long moment before he looked away. "And why would anyone poison themselves?" she asked. "He even has a medical bracelet that says he's allergic to sulfur." "I don't know," Michael muttered. "I mean, he's really upset. His wife and I—" "Yes?" prompted Elise when he said nothing more. Arriving at St. Elizabeth's Trauma Center, John Lee was hurriedly wheeled to a curtained-off area. Blood was oozing from his mouth, and his lips were blue. Dr. Charles Lapointe performed an emergency tracheotomy, and gradually the color returned to John's face. "It'll be fine," Charlie assured him. "We haven't lost any staff yet." John nodded tiredly, understanding. When John woke up, he saw that he was in a private room. The head nurse, Molly Dunham, smiled at him, and he smiled weakly back. "Man, Lee, you wanted a break. Just write a statement, huh?" Molly said. "Paperwork takes too long," John muttered. Molly laughed and patted his arm. Kenzie woke abruptly upon hearing Molly and John talking. She rose to her feet and walked over to her husband's bed. "Oh, baby," she greeted him joyfully. "Oh, my God, when they called me—" "Out!" John spat angrily. "Get out! Get out of my sight! Get out of my life! Get out of here!" Molly lost her smile and stared at the couple. Then her professional instincts kicked in. "Come on, Mrs. Lee. Let him recover," she said, gently nudging the maternity ward nurse toward the door. "But he's my husband. I've been here all night," Kenzie sobbed. "Damn it!" John roared as loudly as he could with his dry throat. "I'm here because of you and that damned doctor." Outside the private room, Molly hugged the short, pale woman and stroked her back. She watched as Kenzie walked numbly to the elevator and pressed the down button. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Sergeant Eliza Richards stepped out. The girl at the rotunda pointed to John's room. Eliza knocked on the closed door and entered. "Mr. Lee, I'm Sergeant Eliza Richards," she introduced herself. "I assume you're ready to tell me what happened?" John Lee had met Kenzie in a microbiology class. The instructor was Dr. Kim Kwan, a North Korean refugee with a speech defect. In the first 2 sessions, Dr. Kwan conducted the class as if it were a graduate course. "I'm going to fail and never become a nurse," Kenzie said, her dark eyes filling with tears. John smiled sympathetically. He had done well in science in school, but this wasn't high school. "Let's go to the library and study. Maybe we can help each other," he suggested. Kenzie had to rush to her algebra class, but they agreed to meet after lunch. John watched her plump figure as she ran to her algebra class, her pale legs standing out against her black shorts. They met at the library at the University of Louisiana at DeGard, went up to the 3rd floor, and settled into a booth. SIL. Kenzie wasn't a beauty. Her black hair reached down to her shoulders, slicked back to make her forehead look huge. Her dark eyebrows and pale skin made her appearance even more striking. Her eyes were dark brown, her nose slightly large, and her thin lips a pale pink. When she opened her mouth, John couldn't help but smile at the metallic sheen of her bulky orthodontic braces. "Yeah, I know," Kenzie said. "I look like Jaws from the James Bond movies." She was pear-shaped, with almost no shoulders, and the strap of her halter top kept slipping from her neck. Together, she and John compared their notes, studying the material in the textbook. "Then why doesn't he just say so?" Kenzie complained. "Maybe his English isn't great. Maybe that's what he means," John shrugged. She laughed, a musical, happy laugh, and John smiled. With his tightly coiled carrot-orange hair, many freckles, and chubby body, John wasn't used to spending time with girls. In high school, the only time a girl talked to him was when she needed help with an assignment, so he treated Kenzie like a friend. Over time, they began studying together. Stall number 3 became their stall. Microbiology was the only subject they took together, but they both took algebra, American history, and sociology 101, so they studied those subjects together as well. On the first exam, John and Kenzie were the only ones in the class to score a 100. When they met at booth 3, Kenzie excitedly showed John her algebra test with the 100 inches in the corner. Then she kissed him, right on the lips. Until that kiss, John had seen Kenzie as just another student, a buddy. They shared the same curriculum, the same aspirations to become nurses, and even common likes and dislikes. They both thought hot dogs were disgusting, loved Reuben sandwiches, thought oatmeal was like vomit and wouldn't eat it, but loved oatmeal raisin cookies. "Peanut butter is the best, though," Kenzie said smugly. "Maybe after the Girl Scout mints," John agreed. "Oh my God, I can eat an entire box in 5 minutes!" Kenzie exclaimed. 5 minutes? What, did you stop to make a phone call or something?" John teased, and she laughed her happy laugh. But then she got a 100 on her algebra exam and kissed him. Kenzie seemed as surprised by the kiss as John was. After gazing at each other for a long moment, she gently leaned forward and kissed him again. And just like that, they went from study buddies to a couple. Kathy Lee, John's mother, was not an overly warm woman, something John had warned Kenzie about in advance. The doctor asked her if she planned to breastfeed me, and she said, "No, we're just going to be friends," John joked. "That's terrible," Kenzie said, smirking when John laughed. "Yes, I was the only kid in my kindergarten class who was encouraged to take candy from strangers," John added. Katie was cool about her only child's friend, albeit very, very awkward. "Kenzie, I don't think I've heard that name before," Katie said after introductions. "My mom was a big fan of the show Dr. Kenzie, Medicine Woman," Kenzie explained. "I see," Katie replied. "But why did you call John John?" Kenzie asked. "I should have named him something," Katie replied. "Yes, ma'am, I can't call him Hey You, but John is kind of unusual," Kenzie mewed. "Our last name is Lee. Someone said we're related to Robert E. Lee," John cut in. Finally, they stepped out of the house. "Gee," said Kenzie as the door closed behind them. "I told you so," John said. Meeting Kenzie's parents was another exercise in restraint. "There's a first time for everything," John agreed easily. "But I didn't realize I was the first straight guy to go into nursing. Kenzie, why didn't you tell me that?" "I thought you knew," Kenzie said, also looking at her father. After dropping him off at his house, Kenzie leaned over and kissed him. "I love you," she whispered. "God, I love you too," John confirmed. The next time the pain was more pleasurable for Kenzie. "There are 3 more in the glove box," he muttered, panting. "Get another one," she demanded. "Kenzie, give me a chance to catch my breath, huh?" he whimpered. By their 3rd year at UCLA, people began to notice the pair and consider them desirable. Kenzie was outraged when Naomi Blumenthal, one of the cheerleaders, asked John for help in organic chemistry class. "I'm in the same class," Kenzie growled. "I'm going to help you, okay?" Another nursing candidate, a chubby man, tried to separate Kenzie from John. He pretended he wasn't familiar with their material, complimented them, and questioned John's masculinity and fidelity. "Grant, you're a very nice guy," Kenzie said affectionately, after he once again tried to question John's manhood. Right before their graduation, news swept through nursing school that St. Elizabeth Parish was opening a trauma center in DeHardy. Because Kenzie and John Lee had a 4.0 grade point average, the dean of nursing wrote letters of recommendation for each of them. Paula Lambert, acting CEO of St. Elizabeth Parish Trauma Center, hired Kenzie and John after one interview. Once they received their degrees and certificates, John asked Kenzie to marry him. They were married at Redemption Lutheran Church in Kimball, Louisiana, as their families were Lutherans. Not very committed Lutherans, but Lutherans nonetheless. Kathy Lee was an atheist and raised John to be an atheist as well. However, unlike Kathy, John did not consider all believers in God to be foolish, thoughtless sheep following the herds. John marveled at the simplicity of the church building and the beauty of the wedding ceremony. In her ivory wedding dress, Kenzie, hanging on her father's arm, was the epitome of beauty. Even Katie couldn't find anything critical about the dress. The reception was held in the hall adjacent to the church building. Katie splurged a little on the reception. She booked the Bombay Cafe to cater the event and hired a DJ for the music. Connie Edwards took the photos and felt she had earned every penny, as she constantly had to remind the groom's mother to smile. "This is a happy day," Connie told Katie. "You're finally getting your son out of your house." "He was never home anyway," Katie said, forcing a smile on her stern face. "God, that's scary," Connie muttered to herself, snapping the photo. Kenzie and John faced a dilemma: a honeymoon at Gulf Shores Beach, Alabama, or the security deposit and first month's rent on an apartment. "Guys, actually, you should think about buying a house," Terry suggested. "Once they finish the hospital, real estate will skyrocket." Katie very reluctantly agreed to co-sign on a loan for her son and daughter-in-law. Danny Scanduro of First to Guard National Bank didn't notice her reluctance and quietly suggested that she might want to tender her resignation within 30 days. This made Katie feel a little more cooperative. The house was a modest wooden structure with 3 bedrooms, 1 full bathroom, and an attached bath with a walk-in shower. "It's functional," was all Katie said as the newlyweds proudly showed the house to their parents. "I love the kitchen. Oh, gas. Gas is the best to cook on," Terry enthused. "And it's obvious they both like to cook, huh?" Dwight said, patting John's small potbelly. "Dwight, really?" Terry hissed, embarrassed. "Yeah, you love cooking almost as much as you love eating," John told his father-in-law. Terry's prediction came true. The house, bought for $37,000, was offered $72,000 by a Century 21 agent just 3 months later. John became a nurse in the emergency room. Though his weight was a little over average, he was very strong and a source of calm in a chaotic environment. Kenzie began working in the neonatal unit at St. Elizabeth Parish Trauma Center. "I love children," she smiled happily. When she lost her first patient, an infant born 2.5 months premature, she was devastated. "Go, Trevor," she sobbed, turning to the infant. "Go to God." John had already seen a lot of death. A prom queen who didn't survive falling off her boyfriend's motorcycle while drunk. An elderly man who claimed to feel fine and then collapsed from a massive heart attack. A boy whose brother accidentally shot him with their mother's boyfriend's handgun. But John held his wife tightly as she wept bitter tears for the child she had known for less than 24 hours. "What? It wasn't even her baby," Katie replied when John told her what had happened. Because they worked in different departments of the hospital, it was not uncommon for one of them to finish work just as the other arrived. When they worked the same shift, they had lunch or dinner together. On their days off, they tried to spend time together and, if possible, avoid getting undressed. 3 years after their wedding, John and Kenzie finally went on a honeymoon, but their discretion failed them. They learned the hard way that 2 very fair-skinned people on a sun-soaked sandy beach was not a good idea. In their 4th year of marriage, they decided to go to the Smoky Mountains instead. Both of them had to explain to their co-workers how they had managed to smear poison oak on their bare asses. "I swear to God, it makes me want to grab a piece of sandpaper and just scratch, scratch, scratch," John muttered. "I thought you didn't believe in God," Kenzie teased. "Since I met you?" "Kinda started," John said. "Baby, that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said," Kenzie smiled, continuing to apply lotion to her backside. Dr. Michael transferred from the University of Missouri River Medical Center to St. Elizabeth Parish Trauma Center. At home, John listened to Kenzie talk about the new cardiologist. "We were in the cafeteria, and Debbie's in there. God, you'd swear she's a Marine or something," Kenzie said. "Are you sure that was Debbie? Compared to what I hear coming out of her mouth, it sounds pretty decent," John said. While Kenzie teased John about Dr. Debbie Ann Thompson, the former cheerleader turned ER doctor, and John teased Kenzie about the Greek god cardiologist, Dr. Michael sat in his new office, still irritated by his meeting with Paula Lambert, CEO of St. Elizabeth's. Then she brought the hammer down on him. Somehow, she managed to uncover why he had completed his residency at Humboldt Hospital in Low Ridge, Texas, only to not be retained. She learned the reasons behind his abrupt departure from the University of Missouri River Medical Center to take a position at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, despite being well established at the University Medical Center. One complaint, Dr. Olson. Just one complaint of inappropriate behavior, and I'll have you escorted out of here. I'll also petition the AMA to revoke your license. This is a hospital, not your personal playground, Monit, the woman stated coldly, fixing him with a steely gaze. Is that perfectly clear to you? He no longer fantasized about betting her. Now he imagined punching her. Absolutely, he assured her. Now, in the solitude of his office, he reflected on the nurses and doctors he had encountered that day. He recognized the type. Michael had encountered it all his life. And he knew he could have had the homecoming queen, the head cheerleader, or an aspiring model. But Michael preferred less conventionally attractive women. If they were married, that was even better. For one thing, they were easier to manage. Most homecoming queens and models were aware of their beauty and felt entitled. But the plain Janes? They were grateful for any attention shown to them. And often, the less attractive they were, the more willing they were to indulge in his desires, the more they were willing to submit. And if they were married, they usually had a lot more to lose than he did if their affair were to be exposed. Unfortunately, his last conquest, his most recent fling, had taken her own life after Michael ended things, to pursue another. Her farewell note contained intimate details of their affair. So, Dr. Michael transferred to the trauma center at St. Elizabeth Parish. The St. Elizabeth Parish Trauma Center website prominently featured a fair-skinned, pear-shaped woman he had noticed in the cafeteria. Just saying hello to her would be enough to make her weak in the knees, he muttered, staring at Kenzie's picture. Neonatal, Michael murmured to himself. Sergeant Eliza Richards waited patiently while her brother-in-law, Dr. Charles Lapointe, examined his patient. She smirked when he jokingly told John that if Eliza was bothering him, all he had to do was press the call button and he would personally escort her out of the building. How long will my throat be sore? John asked. A couple of days, Charlie replied. Fine, John muttered. Anyway, catch you later, Lizzie, Charlie said. What? Don't call me that, John retorted. No, I'm Lizzie, Eliza clarified with a smile. Trey, my godson, had trouble saying Aunt Eliza, so it became Aunt Lizzie. Oh, John smiled. Yeah, you seem like a Lizzie. A name I wear with pride, Eliza admitted. But back to the whole mess, huh? Another baby was born to a methamphetamine addict, born with a serious heart murmur, and Dr. Michael was urgently called to the neonatal operating room. Kenzie, one of 3 surgical nurses on duty, watched anxiously as Dr. Michael fought to save Olive Sue's life. Come on, honey, keep fighting. You can do it, Kenzie quietly pleaded with the infant. But Olive Sue Trapani did not survive. Dr. Michael embraced the sobbing nurse, whispering words of sympathy and comfort. Thus began their courtship dance. He would drop by to check on her. On days when John wasn't working, Dr. Michael conveniently coincided his lunch breaks with Kenzie's. Flattered by Dr. Olson's, as he insisted she call him Michael, attention, Kenzie couldn't quite believe that such a handsome man was interested in her. Then, another baby was born with a heart defect. Dr. Michael was summoned, and together with Kenzie, they fought to save Annette Jensen's life. 7 hours into the surgery, Annette Rachel Jensen let out a healthy cry. Overwhelmed with relief, Kenzie collapsed into Dr. Michael's waiting arms. Their first kiss caught her by surprise, and she fled the room. All the way home, she replayed that kiss in her mind over and over again. It was clearly an accident. Just as Kenzie's own emotions had overwhelmed her, Dr. Michael's emotions had evidently taken control of him. Hey, darling, John greeted his weary wife. How did it go? We did it. Annette Rachel Jensen is crying for her mom, Kenzie exclaimed. The next time their paths crossed, Kenzie allowed Michael to kiss her. He was a skilled kisser, but then again, so was John. John knew exactly the kind of kisses his wife enjoyed, playful and affectionate. One morning, after a grueling night shift in the emergency room, John wearily slipped out of his robe and gathered their laundry. John put the panties in the washing machine along with the rest of their clothes. He washed, dried, and neatly folded everything, stacking their scrubs in a tidy pile. The soiled panties, turned inside out, were placed carefully on top. He then packed all his belongings and moved back to his mother's house. Kathy Lee, as usual, was cold and reserved as her son wept over the loss of his marriage, the woman he had loved fervently throughout most of his adult life. "So, how much should I pay for room and board? About $100 a week?" Katie asked. "Yes, Mother, I'll pay you $100 a week," John replied. Kenzie arrived home an hour later than usual. Michael took her to his apartment, where they made slow, deliberate love. Kenzie made an excuse, but upon realizing John wasn't around, she promptly forgot about it. Instead, she quickly microwaved herself a meal, ate it while watching a recorded show, and went to bed. In the morning, she grabbed her last clean robe, slipped into fresh panties, and decided to do the laundry. She smiled upon finding that John had already emptied the laundry basket. After making herself breakfast, she rushed off to another day of duty. Seeing John's car in the parking lot, she furrowed her brow. He hadn't been home last night or this morning. Then she remembered Brian was on vacation, so John was probably covering his shift. After finishing her shift, she declined Michael's invitation to his apartment and drove home. Kenzie sat in her car in the driveway for a long time. John's car wasn't in the parking lot when she left the hospital, and it wasn't here. A walk around the house reassured Kenzie that nothing terrible had happened, until she looked into the back room and saw the neatly folded clothes. "Oh, God, no," Kenzie whispered. "Did she try to contact you?" Eliza asked when John returned from the bathroom. "And wash your hands, mister?" "Yeah, cluttering up my phone with all sorts of voicemails, texts," John replied, returning to bed. "Never realized what a pain those stupid messages are, you know?" He smirked at Eliza. "Sarge, am I a nurse? Of course, I washed my hands. Basically, it's the usual. It's not what it looks like, it's not what you think it is, and it doesn't mean anything." How could she know what I was thinking? And maybe it didn't mean anything to her. "I'm an atheist here, but it meant a lot to me," John said. "Are you an atheist?" Eliza asked. "No, not really," John admitted. "My mom's an atheist. Tried to raise me that way, but honestly, 14 billion years ago there was space gas that just exploded. Some of the gas cooled down, some didn't, and we just happened to be on a piece of rock with all the conditions for water, air, trees, animals, people. It's just a lot of coincidences. So there's not some divine guidance, you know? What if there's no divine creator? Where did that cloud of cosmic gas come from? How did it get there?" "You're giving me a headache," Eliza smiled. "Anyway, I'm supposed to be an atheist, but I have some feelings about it, you know? Some moral feelings about what marriage should mean," John continued. "She's blowing up your phone," Eliza reminded him, shifting the conversation away from the religious topic John was grappling with. Oh, yeah, anyway, she leaves a million messages, and I delete them almost as fast as she leaves them," John said. "It's been going on like that for a few days, and then I get a message from good old Michael Olson." "Got that message?" asked Eliza. John grabbed his cell phone and frowned. The call had been disconnected, and he saw that Kenzie had left multiple text and voice messages again. He decided to delete them once Eliza saw the message from Dr. Michael. "That's not good," Michael said as Kenzie sobbed. Paula Lambert had everything arranged for Dr. Olson. One affair, one inappropriate encounter with a married coworker, and Paula would do everything in her power not only to fire him, but also to get the AMA to review his case. Michael was desperate for this incident to go away. "I just want to talk to him, and he won't even answer his cell phone," Kenzie sobbed. "I need to talk to him too," Michael agreed. "You just have to make him realize that it's okay, and it doesn't have to threaten your marriage," Michael reflected. "No," Kenzie snorted. "I love him just as much, if not more than the first time I met him." "What's his number?" asked Michael, mentally composing a text message. The plan was simple. Michael just wanted to put John in a receptive state, where he would listen and agree to suggestions. He assured the distraught nurse that his affair with Kenzie was over, that John had nothing to fear, and that he had no intention of seducing Kenzie again. In this suggestive state, Michael also reassured the nurse that Kenzie loved John, despite him not being a handsome doctor. Michael received a response to his text message almost an hour after Kenzie had left his apartment. He had just managed to wash off Quinn's scent when his phone rang. "Fine," Michael replied tersely. The following evening, Michael proposed a trip to the Dead End Bar. In his message, he mentioned the cold beer and attractive women there. Meanwhile, Kenzie lay alone in bed at home when she saw Michael's call. Recognizing the number, she simply forwarded it to voicemail. Michael was about to hang up when Quinn's voicemail picked up. It was Dr. Michael. He wasn't one to leave messages. "Hey, babe," he started. "So, we're meeting your husband tomorrow night." Michael made his way down to maintenance, flashing a smile and trying his charm on two burly young men from the trauma center at St. Elizabeth's Parish. His charm didn't work, but $25 and a beer each did the trick. John informed his mother that he wouldn't be home for dinner the next night, and that she could cook whatever she wanted for herself. "One piece of chicken, and it wasn't even that burnt," Katie retorted sharply, not amused by her son's teasing. "Smoke alarm went off, Mom," John deadpanned, finding no humor in his mother's culinary skills. His shift in the ER was grueling. A 3-car collision on Highway 19 left 4 injured, including a terrified little girl. John assisted Dr. Debbie Thompson in stabilizing the child's condition and witnessed Dr. Charles Lapointe's efforts to save a mother of a child involved in the accident. The driver responsible lost both legs but survived. Several times, John had to fetch keys, unlock the supply closet, gather supplies, document his actions, and ensure the door was securely locked before hurrying back to the emergency room. Just before the end of his shift, another child, a victim of electrocution, arrived. As beautiful as Dr. Thompson was, grief did not suit her. They tried to revive the child, but ultimately Dr. Thompson had to concede defeat with a shake of her head. She wiped away her tears and expressed her condolences to the child's mother. John stood nearby. Sometimes parents and relatives blame doctors for their loss, but in this instance, the mother and doctor embraced, sharing their sorrow. Kenzie's car was absent from the parking lot. Dr. Olson's BMW was also nowhere to be seen. John sighed, still haunted by the tragic loss of life he had just witnessed. "Come on, my man, let's go grab a cold beer," he murmured to himself, seeking a brief respite. The dancer on stage exuded a captivating allure, her beauty and grace reminiscent of the girls John had longed for in his high school days. They were the kind who would laugh when he gathered the courage to ask them out, a feat he attempted only a few times before resigning to rejection. Kenzie had been a cherished and welcome presence in John's life until Dr. Michael Olson entered the scene. The waitress, an Asian American in her uniform, appeared somewhat cheaply dressed, but her warm smile was inviting. John realized he needed to use the restroom before leaving the hospital, a need that persisted even as another dancer moved around him, enticing patrons to pay for dates at the Hurricane Room. She had a pleasant face and a remarkable physique that caught John's attention. Despite his temptation, John could hear his mother's voice in his head, reproaching him for contemplating spending $150 on such a tawdry encounter. "Sorry, Mom," John chuckled to himself, feeling relieved as he finally sank into the urinal. "But have you seen the rates good girls charge? Tawdry is all I can afford." When John returned, a beer awaited him on the table. It had a generous head, and he observed the condensation trickling down from the frosted mug onto the table's vinyl upholstery. The first sip of draft beer always brought a moment of pleasure. A hint of foam tickled his lips, delivering the chilled amber liquid with its lively carbonation, teasing his tongue. "There's nothing quite like ice cold," John started to say. Suddenly his eyes widened. An icy sensation rushed down his throat, but the taste left on his tongue wasn't the usual pleasant flavor of beer. It was a peculiar, metallic, slightly sour taste. His tongue felt swollen in his mouth, making it difficult to breathe. John sensed his throat beginning to constrict, making it hard to swallow or speak. The doctor's voice faded into a distant murmur, lost amid John's growing distress. 2 days after the terrifying incident at the dead end, John was discharged from the hospital. He changed into freshly laundered hospital gowns and underwear, expressing gratitude to Molly and the other nurses who had attended to him during his stay. Taking a cab to the dead-end bar, John retrieved his car. As he walked in, Katie greeted him with news. "Kenzie called for you," Katie said. "I missed you too, Mom." No, I'm feeling fine. Thank you for asking. The flowers were beautiful, and I really appreciated your visit while I was in the hospital," John replied warmly before heading to his room. "Make sure you dry off, John," Kathy reminded him. Returning to work the following Tuesday, John learned that Dr. Michael had been fired and was under investigation by the AMA. Eric and Joe, 2 maintenance workers, faced suspensions. Joe accepted his, but Eric quit in frustration. "I dared sit in." These developments brought John a sense of relief. Finally, Michael was facing consequences for his actions. Though John didn't know Joe or Eric well, he nodded politely when their paths crossed in the hospital corridors. However, Kenzie also faced suspension pending an investigation into the alleged poisoning attempt on John. "Do you think I should talk to her supervisor?" John asked Dr. Thompson during a brief lull in the ER chaos. "Bernie wasn't involved. It was Paula Lambert who made the call," Debbie replied with a shrug. "Maybe I should talk to Miss Lambert then?" John suggested. "Honestly, I'm not sure it would make a difference, but you could try," Debbie said, her attention shifting as an ambulance arrived at the ER doors. Unfortunately, the overdose victim didn't survive, leaving Debbie to grimly contact the authorities. The caller who dialed 911 remained tight-lipped about their identity and the circumstances. Under pressure from law enforcement, Robin Shallier eventually disclosed the victim's name, Alicia Begnaud, and identified the school friend who sold them the pills. "Another tragic day in the ER," Debbie muttered, her gaze falling on Alicia's serene face. "This kind of senseless tragedy is why my mother is an atheist," John muttered angrily, grappling with the unnecessary loss of life. Meanwhile, an elderly man experiencing a potential heart attack diverted emergency staff for the next 20 minutes. "Oh, God, no!" Alicia's mother cried out upon seeing her daughter's lifeless body. John rushed to her side, preventing her collapse and assisting the orderly in moving her onto a gurney. "Yep, just another day in the ER," John muttered wearily as he left the room. "Yeah," Brian McNichol agreed, attaching his ID badge and preparing for another shift in the emergency room. Nodding wearily, John trudged down the back hallway toward the employee parking lot. As he emerged from the hospital, Paula Lambert stepped out beside him, both heading toward their cars parked in the employee lot. John inquired about her well-being, asking if she had fully recovered from her ordeal. He also inquired about her pets, mentioning her 3 cats and 2 dogs. Paula shared that she had recently lost one of her cats, and her partner had decided to replace Clint Eastwood, their orange tabby, with a lop-eared basset hound named Elvis Presley. "Well, what else would you name a hound dog, right?" John chuckled, and Paula smiled in agreement. Taking advantage of their chance meeting, John asked about Paula's children. She affectionately referred to them as rotten, just rotten animals, with a smile. "Hey, Miss Lambert," John said, unlocking his BMW. "If you're ever in need of a divorce lawyer—" "Nicole Banks," Paula interjected, "took over Sophia Kucher's office when she retired." She opened her car door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry," she added sincerely. John nodded appreciatively, sensing Paula's genuine remorse. Later, he dialed Cooter & Associates and scheduled an appointment with Miss Banks, thanking the receptionist politely before heading home. "Kenzie called. I'm not your secretary," Katie snapped as John walked in. "Tell her yourself. What's for dinner?" he retorted. "Homemade vegetable soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, Mr. Smartass," Katie snapped back. After dinner, John retreated to his room. When Kenzie called again, John sighed heavily, reiterating Katie's words that his mother was not his secretary, then ending the call. The next day, John met Nicole Banks, a stylish brunette recommended by Paula Lambert. As they discussed legal matters, John wrote a check, completed paperwork, and felt a pang of emotion as he signed it. Any breakup is tough, Nicole empathized softly, but sometimes pruning a rosebush helps it grow better. I was content living freely, John replied bitterly. I understand, Nicole reassured him. Sometimes choices are made for us. She filed a petition and made arrangements with Richard Boudreau. Meanwhile, Kenzie continued with her household chores, mechanically eating, showering, and cleaning to pass the time. She checked her appearance in the mirror, adjusted her clothes, and answered the doorbell. Hey, Kenzie, how's everything? Richard greeted her warmly. Sorry, hi, I'm Richard, Bernie's husband. Oh, right. We met at the pizza party, Kenzie recalled with a smile. Yes, exactly. Richard nodded. So, what can I... He began, waiting for Kenzie to respond. And you've already been served, Richard said, handing Kenzie an envelope. Kenzie took the envelope from the manila, her face contorting with embarrassment. Richard snapped a digital picture of her, holding the envelope, and departed. Waving goodbye to her boss's husband, Kenzie closed the door behind him. Please, God, let it not be what I think it is, she pleaded. In a desperate attempt to strike a plea deal, Michael attempted to shift blame, claiming Kenzie had proposed using a sulfur-based anabolic steroid in John's beer. However, Kenzie's testimony led to additional perjury charges filed by the AITA against Dr. Michael. Ignoring Sonny Lambert's counsel, his attorney, the doctor opted for a jury trial, confident he could charm the female jurors into declaring him innocent. If that failed, he hoped for a lighter sentence. 12 to 25, he groaned, no longer proud, as the judge's gavel fell. A man nearly died, Michael, slurred Sonny Lambert drunkenly. You're plastered, muttered Michael. You're finished, Sonny smirked. Kenzie lost her nursing license, with a chance to reapply after a year. She found employment at the Wagon Wheel Day Care Center in Bender, Louisiana, caring for infants and toddlers. She didn't contest the divorce. John offered to sell her his half of the house, but tearfully, Kenzie insisted it wasn't home without him. She couldn't stay there alone. They managed to sell the house for $84,000, and after paying off their shared debt of $20,480, they split the proceeds. As they signed the papers to finalize the sale, Kenzie looked across the table. I'm sorry, she admitted. Me too, John said softly. I miss you, Kenzie whispered. Me too, John replied. Leaving the lawyer's office, John drove to the dead-end bar. Checking his watch, he noted it was around 5 o'clock and parked. On stage, a stunning strawberry blonde swayed to a Nine Inch Nails song John didn't recognize. A customer dropped a $5 bill into her tip jar, and she flashed him a beautiful smile. She's new, isn't she? John asked as an Asian American waitress approached his table. Yeah, just starting out. Dawn Lee began before recognizing John. You're him, she exclaimed. I'm who? John asked, puzzled. The guy who got poisoned here, she explained, disappearing before John could order a draft from St. Elizabeth's. Moments later, the attractive blonde who had been dancing on stage when John first met the doctor slid into the seat opposite him, wide-eyed and smiling. Hi, I'm Heather. I was here the day you got poisoned, the blonde said cheerfully. She wrapped her arms around him, pressing his face against her ample cleavage. Then she kissed his forehead, leaving a smudge of bright red lipstick. I prayed and prayed that you'd be okay, she announced enthusiastically, seating herself without invitation. Me too, the waitress chimed in, affectionately stroking his arm. Wow, John stammered, blushing at the attention from the two beautiful women. Thank you. I mean, as you can see, I'm fine now. Heather, are you on break or something? Kirsten called out to the strawberry blonde leaving the stage. Don't go anywhere, Heather pleaded, rising to her feet. John ordered a draft beer and a plate of nachos. He had missed lunch due to a meeting at the law firm, but wasn't hungry enough for the meatloaf, the daily special. I'll give you extra, Dawn Lee whispered in his ear, her warm breath sending a shiver down his spine. Heather loves the nachos here. The power station's Some Like It Hot started playing, and Heather took the stage. As she danced, she flashed a dazzling smile in John's direction. "Here you go, honey," Don Lee said, setting the draft in front of him. Just as Heather finished her performance, Don Lee returned with a second draft and a massive plate of nachos. "Now I'm taking a break," Heather announced, slipping back into her top. "Oh, nachos. Mind if I join?" she asked, seating herself without waiting for an invitation. "Yeah, she hooked me up," John grinned, and Heather eagerly dug into the nachos. "By the way, what's your name?" she asked, nodding in appreciation, as Don Lee placed a bottle of water on the table. John Lee," he replied. "From the Iliad and the Odyssey? Or from the Civil War?" Heather inquired. "Civil War? My mom thinks we're related to Robert E. Lee," John chuckled. They listened to an energetic Latina set, an African-American girl's performance, and the start of another Strawberry Blondes act when Heather leaned in and kissed John squarely on the lips. "Next up, thanks for the nachos," she said, giving him a quick peck before darting off. Not drunk, but pleasantly buzzed, John enjoyed the company of Don Lee and Heather Bro as their shifts wound down. "Oh, great," he smiled. "Can I get the check then?" "Check? What check?" Don Lee asked. "You're our guest," Heather chimed in, kissing him once more. "Well, I suppose I should get myself a coffee then," John said, realizing he had too much alcohol in his system to drive. "Would you like coffee here? Or—" Don Lee leaned in, whispering in his ear, "Coffee at our place?" "Use real half and half," Heather suggested with a playful grin. "You'd have to be a fool to turn down an offer like that," John chuckled. "And my mom didn't raise any fools." John savored Heather's freshly ground coffee with real cream. The rich, robust flavors didn't hit him until 4:30 in the morning, as he prepared to leave their cozy, one-bedroom apartment for his shift at the hospital. He watched Heather meticulously select coffee beans, blending different varieties with apparent enjoyment. "Sorry for waking you so early," John whispered as Don Lee continued to sleep. Heather flashed him a dazzling smile, shrugged, and planted a kiss on his lips before turning on the coffee grinder. "I have an electric one," she admitted in a hushed tone, "but honestly, I prefer doing it by hand." She filled the decanter with ice water, and soon the apartment was filled with the inviting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Handing John a large mug, she accompanied it with a tender kiss. "What time do you get off?" Heather asked, sipping her coffee. 6, John replied. 6? And it's only 4:30, she exclaimed. "Need a shower and a shave. Need to wake up," John smiled. "Oh, we can shower here," she suggested, running her fingers over his stubble. "And we've got a razor for that handsome face," she added. "Nah, we tried showering last night, remember?" John grinned, and she rewarded him with another bright smile. "Yeah, but the tank only holds 25 gallons, she shrugged. "So what's your plan?" She playfully raised an eyebrow. "Lots of water when Don Lee and I shower together," she teased. She buttoned his shirt and gazed into his brown eyes, leaning in to kiss him again. "So, what time do you finish?" she asked. 4, John said. "You're going back?" Heather invited. "It's our day off." John drove to his mother's house, smiling. "I don't have a hotel here. Come and go as you please," Katie snapped as John entered the dimly lit living room. "No kidding. The hotel staff is nicer," John agreed. "I won't be home again tonight, okay?" Paula Lambert requested an audit of medical supplies on each floor of the hospital. The last time John conducted an inventory was in the ambulance pantry, so the tedious task of counting every bottle, every bandage, fell to Brian McNichol. "1 bottle of Anna's sulfate, seal broken," he muttered. Brian crossed the item off the computer printout and discarded the bottle into the trash.